right. Well, welcome tonight. It's a little bit after 7, so we'll go ahead and start the Planning Commission meeting for December 18th, 2014. I'd like to call it to order. I guess, Linda, are you going to?
Call the roll. Ezett, Green, Kierline, here. Hamilton, here. Lamont, here. Gonzalez-Parber, here. And Chair Ketchum.
Here. All right. So the next item is approval of the agenda. I know that earlier today you did send one item that item 164 Willow is going to be continued.
Yes, we've recommended continuance until the January 15th meeting. Did you want a little explanation?
Yeah, just for the record.
Yeah, we discovered this afternoon, it was brought to our attention by the Open Space Committee that there's a program in the general plan that requires that certain parcels that are vacant, that are adjacent to open space, this happens to be adjacent to open space in San Anselmo, that they be allowed to review in the initial review period the property and the tree reports and things and come up with their own report. They are looking to buy certain parcels, so they would like that opportunity, and the applicant is agreed to the continuance, and so they're going to have a report for you after they review the information for your next meeting.
Let me elaborate, if I may. In the appendix of the general plan, under the open space section of the appendix, there's a list of parcels that were identified in the general plan, but it doesn't specify APN numbers for all those parcels. It just refers to certain parcels generically. And while it caught the upper Ridgeway parcels, which led to the recent purchase of one of them, it referred to the upper end of Willow on the upper right side. And depending on what map you look at, it looks like there's parcels beyond that, but it's upper Ridgeway that's actually beyond that. So there's just one parcel that is this 167 Willow. And unfortunately, it was an oversight between our intern, Arijit, that worked with the Open Space Committee in the summer of 2013 to send the letters out to the property owners, and this property was not noticed. So it was an oversight, and this hopefully will help us clean up our coordination because they're going to go back and attach APNs to all the properties in that list. Then we'll have a checklist so this won't happen again.
And they'll send letters to any owner.
Right, any property owners that weren't noticed before. We fortunately deemed this application complete on December 5th, so we have 60 days under the Permit Streamlining Act to hear it, so you're well within your bounds by this going over to January 15th. So this will help clean up the protocol and all that.
All right. Were there any other changes or comments on the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve as amended?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, so we're going to move on to public comments on non-agenda items. So if there's anyone tonight here who wants to speak to something not on tonight's agenda, this is the time to do that. Not seeing anyone jump up, so we'll close that portion of the meeting and we'll move on to consent. There's two items on consent calendar, 23 Claus Drive and 407 Forest Avenue. And at this time, if there's anybody who is here to speak on these items that's not in support of those items, this would be the time to do it. If you're in support of it, there wouldn't be a need. Nobody? Okay. So is there a motion to approve the consent items?
Motion to approve the consent items, 23 Claus Drive and 407 Forest Avenue.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 So the items on consent are approved. There is a 10-day appeal period and a $500 fee to appeal it. So check with town council or town staff before proceeding. But that's, if you're here for one of those two items that's on the consent, it's approved and we're done for tonight. So, all right. Next item tonight, we have item 3 is 127 Dominga Avenue, application 14-46.
Can we just check to see if this person's here for the Willow Avenue project? Are you here for Willow? Okay.
Okay. So we'll just, right, we just, just to, we've had an item on tonight's agenda that's going to be continued. So the Willow Avenue item is going to be continued till next month. It's not going to be heard this month. And the reason why is that, do you want to explain it better?
We have to pass it by the Open Space Committee for their review, and it had been an oversight. So it'll be heard on January 15th.
So we're sorry to get you out for nothing, but it's okay.
Okay.
So should I submit something in writing then?
That was always helpful.
Yeah.
That's always helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we're ready for 127 Dominga.
Okay, so this should look a little familiar. The Planning Commission approved a use permit and setback variances to allow the house to be lifted to bring the existing basement area living space into compliance with the building code ceiling heights and to add a full bathroom on March 20th of 2014. The applicants are now applying to relocate the laundry area that was next to the bathroom in the downstairs area into previously unimproved basement area and to convert 299 square feet of the basement that's currently unfinished into finished condition space. The ceiling heights in that space would be below what's required for living space, but not by much. It'll be 6 feet 8 inches instead of 7 feet. And the approval requires the same discretionary permits that legalization and improvement of the existing living space was required, which is a use permit and setback variances. Staff supported the previous use permit because the project didn't increase the existing conditioned space that was already being used as living space, and they were being taxed as it being living space. The 1,327 square foot residence, which with a 182 square foot bedroom and bath improvement above the garage, already has a floor area ratio, and I rechecked my numbers, it actually has a floor area ratio of 0.41. Bringing the basement that was already being used as living space into compliance with the building code benefited both the town by improving the existing housing stock, and it benefited the owner by providing a safe stairway access to the lower living level. However, improving more of the basement area as conditioned space with large windows will make it attractive for use as living space and make it very difficult for the town to ensure that that area remains storage or used as basement uses. That area, if conditioned, it also results in a floor area ratio of 0.48. So what I wrote in the staff. I just rechecked the numbers and I checked it using the square footages that the applicant put in the application form. So at any rate, it puts it over what's permitted by the code. They're already over it with what you legalized last time. And we weren't able to make the required legal findings for approval to recommend approval of this project. And so we're recommending that you deny the requested use permit and setback variances and direct the applicant to leave this area as unconditioned basement.
So
The planning director wants me to explain. We're okay with them moving the laundry appliances into the unfinished basement because you often find laundry improvements in unfinished basement areas. So that actually will give them a little bit more usable floor space than you had approved the last time for a larger bathroom.
So
So-
again, sorry.
well, I think if you want to,
Yeah,
I just have
just let me
questions.
see if I can summarize in a nutshell. You passed this in March for adding living space down below, and then when the rubber hit the road with sort of the details, they thought it would be helpful to increase the space of the bathroom to move the laundry area into the unfinished space, and then while they were at it, knowing that they had to come back in, why not get some more, and that's where we are.
Well, there was also, now that you made me remember something else, there was also an issue with the stairway, and in order to get the stairway in compliance and in order to have the right hallway width running from the living room to the bathroom, they had to bump the wall into the basement area a little bit, and that kind of led to them thinking, and the house had been raised up, and so that's why they're applying to try to see if you'll grant them the ability to make more conditioned space in the basement.
And again, staff's okay with the laundry area going into that area. That gives a little bit more space than you had approved in March for the allowed area.
Okay, so just what I want to make sure is that it's very clear, because I think we need to, it sounds like we need to change some of the numbers that are in the staff report, just to make sure that the what's being proposed would make it 0.48 floor area ratio.
You know,
or
I didn't
0.43?
get my scale out and check
Okay.
the measurements on the plans. I used the square footages that the applicant had put in their previous two applications. They
Right.
indicate the square footage of the lower floor, the square footage of the second floor, the square footage of the room and bathroom over the garage. So I just used the square footages that they wrote down.
But
we knew they were already at or above.
they're at or above, but what they're proposing, based upon the calculations of the square footages they provided you,
I believe
is an
it's
increase from
0.48.
0.41
1 to
to 0.48.
Right.
So I think what's reflected in here is 0.4 to 0.43.
Right.
And I
I
think
think
the
when I
reason I
calcu-
want to make sure of that is that there have been a few cases where we've had findings for a couple of tenths over, or hundredths, 0.41, 0.42. 0.48 is a substantially different level. So I just want to make sure that that's well explained.
And I believe when I first calculated, I forgot to count the square footage over the garage. That is living space over the garage that I,
Okay.
So we're confident it's over the FAR. Give me
Right.
just one minute.
And
And it's actually kind of a moot discussion because the area that they want to move into,
except that we're counting it because it's going to be improved as conditioned space. So Jim's saying that the ceiling heights don't meet the ceiling height requirement for living space. So they believed, they had a discussion with the building official, and Mark said, well, if it's under 7 feet, it doesn't meet the requirement for living space, but if it's improved and conditioned, it will be used as living space. There's no way for us to ensure that it's not, and we are counting that towards floor area ratio because it will be improved with electrical and windows and heat.
that's what's being requested.
no, and I think that was because trying to figure out condition space, I get that it's finished. I know that if it's less than 7 feet, it doesn't count. But as you said, if you're 6'8", this would be a problem, but if you're 5'8", this is perfectly reasonable living space.
So can I just ask for a clarification, though, of what the differences might be, just really in round terms, not like every nail, but just between conditioned space and living space, other than the ceiling height, just what that difference really is?
Well, it has sheetrock, it's painted, it has windows, it has extensive electrical like you would have in living space. It has outlets and an improved floor. And unfinished basement, usually just you're at the framing and the studs. You don't have sheetrock.
Okay, great, thank you.
Insulation.
That's great.
So within our planning purview, there's the building code that says 7 feet, and then there's planning language, which sounds like it's a little more gray. But sometimes the fire department requires sheetrock if it's in the WUI, or there's improvements that are required by the fire department. I'm going through a situation like this in another town where we're building a storage area over a garage, and there's this narrow bit of over 7 feet is, it's building code height, so it's considered conditioned space. Under the dormers is less, and under the roof line is even less. And so we have this very strange configured dotted outline of conditioned space, none of which is habitable because it's storage and you can't live in that. But that is a very kind of black and white definition of what's conditioned space, as opposed to the kind of gray area that we're talking about. And yes, they could live there and we couldn't enforce whether they use it for storage or not. But I mean, isn't conditioned space and the rest just isn't?
Question. I mean, they are going to have a portion of the basement that, what they're asking for is to leave half the remaining basement area as basement and to do conditioned space for the other half.
Basement being unfinished.
Beyond what was approved, and it would put their floor area ratio over what's permitted by the code.
Right, but if it's,
The unfinished basement area that they're requesting be finished is not being requested by fire to finish it, if that's where you're going with this. Yeah.
I'm just wondering where the lines are, because if we're saying that 6.8 is not habitable space, the building code says that, but we don't have language that says 6.8 is not habitable space, or I just feel like we need some stronger.
It supersedes us. It supersedes the planning piece of it, the zoning ordinance. The building code, the zoning ordinance complies with the building code. We have to comply with the building code.
So technically, it's
not
habitable space.
Correct, exactly.
So
And our definition of floor area doesn't talk about ceiling heights. It just says floor area of single-family residences and duplexes, the sum of all interior floor area measured from the exterior faces of the exterior walls. So you could use the argument that staff should have counted the basement in the first place, but the basement wasn't going to have finished floors, and it wasn't going to have sheetrock, and it wasn't going to have windows. So we didn't count it towards floor area ratio. But if you look at the definition of floor area ratio, I think it's hard to exempt something that's conditioned.
So we're confident it's over the .40, and we're confident that the ceiling height is substandard.
And just one more question, if the other half isn't developed right now, is the ceiling height the same, and would it end up, or does it sort of keep getting?
I think you'll have to ask the applicant that. I'm
It's-
not
I can,
sure.
I can look
What
through
you
the plans, I
approved,
just want to make sure.
what you approved is kosher, is meets the minimum height requirement.
The half that was approved, this
Yes.
is another
Yes.
third. I'm talking about the rest of the basement area. If
I
it's
think
all
it-
6.8.
No,
then
I think, David,
we
is
get
it
this
6.8?
later.
I think it's,
It's
more than 6.8. We brought the slab up to be 6.8 because, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, wait, I'm sorry, you're going to have to, I'm
Yeah,
sorry to
so-
interrupt you.
so
We're going
if
to
we
need you at
don't-
the mic when you talk.
Yeah, what I'll do is, we'll ask that question again when you come up. Do we have other questions for staff at this time?
The house has already been raised up?
Okay.
That was my question. What work has been done between the issuance of the original permit and now?
the house has been raised up. I believe that the only work they've done in this area that wasn't on their approved plans that you saw was to put frame out two windows in the area that they're asking now to make conditioned space. But double check that with the applicant.
Okay. So we ready to, okay. Come on up. Kind of, you've heard some of the discussion, so give us some your insights and some of the details on the questions we asked.
I'm sorry, Stephen, if you
Just
hit
push
the
the
button and pull that up, there you go. There you
Perfect.
go.
My name's David Grabban with G Family Inc. and G Design. Initially, we planned to raise the house 2 full feet, and as we were raising the house, in my communication with Mark, the local inspector, was that if we raised the house the full 3 feet, we would be over a 7-foot ceiling height in the full basement area. So we stopped the lift at 1'9" so that we could keep that area at 6'8", because in the conversations that I had with Mark, who was very helpful with us, he said anything 7 feet or above is considered livable space, and we were very gracious with your first round in this project and didn't want to press that as 7 foot or over for the new livable space. If you look at the initial plan that I submitted, it says that that whole area is used as storage, which it was before this was done. It had a slab, it had a window, it had walls, it had electrical. My client has a lot of storage. She has some very nice antiques from her mother, so on and so forth. To condition the space and to have natural light and ventilation, I thought was beneficial for not only architectural reasons, because when we lifted the house, the lower part of the project became very tall, and without any windows or anything to break up the shingle walls, I just thought it looked not as appealing. We put in the windows, we talked to the engineer, talked to Mark, and this issue arose. We redrafted our plan, and because we only lifted it 1'9". I had to redo the stairs, change the stairs completely so that the stairs would meet code going down. As Linda said, I had to change the hall so that my hall would work out for 36, and the bathroom wasn't working either because of the things we had to change by trying to keep within the 7 foot or lower than 7 foot, because obviously we didn't want that to be counted as livable space. We were told that under 7 feet was not an issue, so I stopped the lift, kept everything lower, and went through that process. Like I said, she had a slab down there before. We refloated the slab because when we lifted the house, the shoring pressure cracked the slab, obviously. So we're not trying to make this livable space. That's not her intention. If you look at how we designed the plan, the stairs cut right through the middle of her house, go down there, it's all opened up. There's no possible way to put a second unit down there. Her laundry room is right down there. Her intention is not to cut this thing up and put an illegal unit down there. If you look at the plan and how it's designed, it's all designed so that this would work out and you guys wouldn't have that many questions about it. There's 3 windows. I doubled up the windows above because architecturally, that's what you learn in the school, and it looks really nice. And if you go by and look at the building, we do great work, and we pride ourselves on doing great work. And I grew up in Fairfax, and I think this is a beautiful part of the neighborhood. And I think that if you guys take the time to go by, you'll see the same thing. So I have a lot of stuff to say, but I can take some questions if you like, or I can keep going with what I have to say.
Well, I'm looking at the plans, and it's describing the ceiling heights for all the conditioned space and the living space. What would the ceiling height be in that area that's kind of shown that's unconditioned?
So we refloated the slab. She had a slab throughout the whole thing. We broke up the slab. The ceiling height would be 7 feet if we didn't refloat the slab, which it is on the left side that says unconditioned storage is 7 feet. So once she adds her slab back in for a rat slab for dry protection for her storage stuff, then it'll be less than 7 feet. And like I said, that was what our goal was to not impose on the 7 foot rule. I talked to Mark, the inspector, before we made these decisions, and I stopped my lifting crew from going any higher so that this wouldn't be an issue. So in my thought process, I did everything I could to keep this going in the right direction, in making the right responsible decisions, getting the information, and I felt like this is the direction I was led into. If I had known that 5'8", that's not possible there. I would have had to build the floor 2 feet higher or something like that. So I literally have 6'8" to walk in that hall to get back to the bathroom, and I have 4x4 studs holding the landing. That's the minimum I could do to get underneath. So everything came down to the 1/4 inch, and I think we did a fantastic job. And we went and we talked to Mark, and he really guided us through the whole process. But light and ventilation, she already had a window, like I said, on the other side. We pulled the window out, put in a door, and put it on the other side. So to me, the windows is something that enhances the look of the house. And light and ventilation in a place like that, I think, is very important for a storage area. It's all sprinklered also.
So are there other questions?
Well, yeah, I just want to ask, the original use permit was seemingly to allow you to add a full bathroom. And so what was the purpose of the original permit?
The purpose of the original permit was to, her stairs were very dangerous. She has a young daughter. They were paying taxes on the room below. They were using that room as a kind of family room, but very dangerous to get down there. So the purpose was to add an additional bathroom and rectify the stair issue. I would say that those were the two main reasons why all this started.
Okay, so has the bathroom been rectified?
Yeah, the bathroom is done. The whole project's done. I'm a week away from my final. We submitted this 2 months ago, and we're hoping that it would be something that was in last month's agenda. Fortunately, it didn't make it to last month's agenda, so the whole rest of the project is finished and ready for final within the next week or two. But this part, I left the sheetrock off. I put the windows in, but I didn't caulk them. I didn't screw them in. I put the trim up and put 2 screws in it because of the rain. Obviously, I needed to seal that area up. All that could come out. They asked me to stop with the sheetrock. I didn't put up the sheetrock and redid my plan as fast as I could and got it into you guys so that you guys could help us make this decision.
Okay, so what, in your mind and for your explanation, what is the current permit going to change then for you?
I don't know. Like you guys said, the 6'8" to me, in my mind, when I was building this project, I worked hard to keep it there for that very reason. I wasn't trying to consider this livable space. It can't be conditioned as a 7-foot ceiling. It can't be sold as a 7-foot ceiling and livable space. To me, everything that we did was for a reason and explicitly guided in this direction. So,
Okay, let me just ask, was the tax issue resolved, that they were being taxed on a room that for living space that wasn't it?
No, she was taxed on that room. It was under 7 feet. It was like 6'9" or 6'11" or something like that. She's been taxed on that since she bought the place. So that was just kind of going into the initial phase with you guys of she's already paying taxes of this. I know that a couple houses on the street have over floor area ratio. My calculations came out at 4.3. I know that 210 Dominga is at 4.2. So to me, this, I was never planning on counting this as livable space. That's why we kept it at 6.8. She can't sell it that way. That's the way that the code was interpreted to me. If I had thought that it was anything different, then this would have been a different deal. But I'm here now, so.
Okay, well, if it's kept at 6'8" and not living space height, is there some tax benefit? I'm just trying to figure out.
No,
oh.
I don't think so. I mean, I am not a tax man, but I don't think so.
Just the applicant in the applicant's
I know that
mind.
everyone has, we live in Fairfax, there's hills, people have, cut out the back of the hill and they have 6'8" storage, and that's just part of being Fairfax.
Okay, and in that lower space now that's been somewhat improved, is there the laundry room in that area?
Yes. As I was going through working with Mark on my project, I laid out the bathroom and said to Mark, it's not working out code-wise to get this bathroom together. The vanity, the way we had it, was not 24 inches past the front of the toilet. It was just a really unusable space, and I talked to him about it, and Mark said, I said, can we take the washer and dryer and stick it in the storage space? He said, yes, sure, as long as it's 6'8" tall. That's the code. And I said, really? So I can take the washer and dryer and put it up there? He said, yes, no problem. As long as it's 6'8", that's the code. Just like you said, a lot of people use the laundry room is not something that is a nice room in most people's houses, and it usually gets pushed into the basement or off to the side or wherever people can put it. So with that said, the reason the laundry room was put up there is because it's 6'8", and the bathroom was too small and wasn't working out code-wise.
Okay, does the laundry room have an electric exhaust fan in it?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Because of that's code. So when we were working with Mark, he said it needs to have an exhaust fan. We put it in a fan. That's new Title 24 as far as I know.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions over here?
I have a question. So is the objective to protect the antiques that are going into the storage space? Or what is she trying to achieve by conditioning the space?
So conditioning a space like that is ventilation, light, natural light, airflow, spiders, rodents, anything like that. Conditioning the space just takes that down and allows you to have a nice open light place. You can put whatever you want in there, and you don't have to worry about spiders and rodents and your stuff getting musty and whatever. As I said before, when I started this project, it says on my plan, the initial plan, the whole entire space there was packed. And when we went through with Linda, we opened the door and looked in, the whole thing was packed, the whole way storage. So she has a lot of nice things that would be better suited in a nice environment. So the storage of those things, having a nice conditioned storage, yes, it's conditioned. We weren't trying to make it livable space. It's under 7 feet. You can't sell it like that,
So,
as I said before.
and I think that you've definitely been able to make that point. I think it's certainly a fair one for us to be considering. This is one that was you were trying to lift it up in the flood zone too, right? So
It's not in the flood
this
zone,
is just
no.
outside the flood zone then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So the lifting was just to make it more usable. It wasn't,
Yeah, in fact,
it wasn't tied to any flood
No,
concerns?
and we
Okay.
just had that huge rain
Right.
in the storm
Right.
and Stormageddon, and the place was great.
Yeah.
So it's in a lot better shape than it's
Yeah.
ever been now, and she spent a bunch of extra money to make it really nice for the neighborhood.
And I think the reason I'm been asking about the other is, again, in a lot of cases, it's not the intent of the current owner. And
Sure.
I don't think anyone feels that this was done intentionally. It sounds like there was a lot of dialogue and discussion trying to figure out, how can we make this work? The issue is that the other unconditioned has the exact same situation, and what is there to stop the next owner from using it in a completely different way? And I think those are the things where if it is 6'8", and we're also bound by our descriptions of how is floor area described. Maybe it's vague, maybe it's not, but those are the kinds of things that we also have to consider. So I think as we're looking at this, and the way I look at a lot of these is, what if this was proposed from the beginning? And if it were proposed from the beginning, would we have considered it this way? I don't feel like any decisions that have been made or any actions that have been taken have been done with the intent of making this a problem. It sounds like there was certainly consultation. It would have been good to hear from Mr. Lockaby just for clarification. But I do think when I'm looking at it, it's really trying to think about it as not your client, and not that I don't believe there was intent to try to get around the system. It's how do we deal with this so that when the next person comes in and wants to do the same thing, what's the difference? How do we justify the difference? So those are the kinds of things that are kind of in my brain right now.
So I agree with that, but I also know that if people want to do something without your guys' approval, they do it. There's plenty of illegal units in Fairfax all over the place. It's not going to be something where you can say, well, the next owner might do this or the next owner might do that, because that's out of your hands. We're here trying to do the right thing in front of you guys with your guys' consent and your approval. So whatever happens on the side, there's always speculation. Well, this guy might put an illegal unit here or an illegal unit there, but that's beyond your control.
No, and I fully respect and appreciate, and I think the other issue is not illegal units,
or livable space.
Permitting units that set new precedents that then everybody else will point to and say, well, will you let them do it there? And then there's always,
Sure.
The applicant was really nice, so we had to. So anyway, I think we have a few more questions up here. Commissioner Hamilton.
So back to somewhat what Shelby was asking about, are there provisions of this space that would allow it to have the ventilation and the windows, but not make it less easy for it to be fully conditioned, such as there's one outlet instead of multiple? I don't know what kind of electrical's in there already, or other things that staff could think of that would say, well,
Yeah, the fewer amenities that the area has, the less likely it's going to turn into living space.
are there other amenities besides the windows and doors that are currently in there that are lending you to say, if it didn't have,
Certainly, if it was restricted to one ceiling light for the electrical, that would go a long way to, the walls would be closed up and finished, and there would be one light. That would help minimize what it was used for.
what about, I don't know whether closed-up walls are required or not, or leaving them open works or not?
Well, that was staff's preference, that it just stay as a basement with unfinished
So-
walls, right?
I just want to ask
And no windows.
one quick interjection was there ever consideration of a deed restriction that would make this, through a deed, basically say this is not deemed livable space, and that would be a
Well, that's
deed
not,
restriction? that would
staff's
be-
made their recommendation, but if you decide to go forward and you can make the findings for this to be conditioned space, I will ask you to require a deed restriction, indicating the square footage and specify, maybe even a floor plan specifying that this area is not to be used for living space.
This area or any other part of the
Yeah.
basement? Because, I mean, to me, that's the
Right.
down the road thing. But you didn't feel, I guess, I want to make sure, you didn't feel that a deed restriction you couldn't get to findings because of the floor area with a deed restriction that said this wouldn't be used as livable space.
The reality is,
or
this house was
counted.
using basement area with substandard ceiling heights as living space before they came to you the first time.
Okay.
Even if she has no intention of using it, 6 feet 8 inches, we
That's
find
great.
areas like that all the time used as living space. The tax assessor doesn't seem to differentiate for ceiling heights. They were being taxed for the area in the basement that had substandard ceiling heights that you approved last time. So, I mean, I think they're going to pay their fair share of taxes. I don't think they're going to be able to get out of it unless it really is an unfinished basement. My problem was I could not make the findings for a variance of the floor area ratio. It's a very small lot, 3,700 square feet. Even if this owner doesn't use that as living space, someone will eventually, and it puts them over the floor area ratio. So you have to make the findings for the use permit and for the setback variances and the FAR variance.
So in the floor area ratio,
Sorry, that we ask all the questions. We'll bring it back and we'll ask lots of questions of staff, so.
do you have any, what kind of changes, like one light instead of multiple lights, unfinished walls instead of finished? I mean, are there other things that you would be open to us recommending that would allow it to be used for storage, that would keep the spiders out, that maybe we say, okay, windows, they were already there. Yes, it's a improvement to the outside facade, but let's do everything that we can to make it look and feel and act and be storage space that meets the minimum requirements for protecting the stuff that's in there, but keeps it not conditioned space, not livable condition space.
My client has already said to me that she'd be willing to sign a deed restriction. So to me, that's already been through, and I mentioned that to Linda when we first got into this, that's not an issue for her. The one light, sure, it seems like more of a safety thing to me, and not having a well-lit space, I don't think that's the way to go personally. It had lights and plugs before, it had more than one light before. So if that's the issue, it's the same thing. If people want to go in and condition a space, once I pull my final permit, that happens all the time, as you guys well know. So whatever restrictions you guys put on this, go ahead.
So I get that point, but what we're looking at here is we need findings that allow us to approve things or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hear what you're saying, and I'm asking, how can we work with you we can't, if this is considered and deemed and looks and feels and is conditioned in a way that requires it to be the floor area ratio,
Yeah.
we can't come up with findings to approve it. So I'm trying to find out what could we modify so that, it works. And if there are things that.
We're willing to do whatever you guys want. Holding back the electrical, that's fine. Not sheetrocking it, again, that's fine. The issue is not conditioning the space or the lighting or the plugs. Like I've said from the beginning, to me, keeping it under 6'8" for what I saw was what you guys wanted, which was 7 feet and under. This is not considered livable space. Again, will never be sold as livable space. And we're willing to work with you guys in whatever way you guys see fit.
But just to make sure, is it sounds like you'd be willing, or your client, to have, basically what I just heard is that you'd be willing to not have it as conditioned space. There would be no discussion around the height, but it could be used as a laundry room. Is that what I heard or not?
I would like to sheetrock it. I would like to put in the electrical.
Right.
Obviously, I'd like to paint it and make it a nice storage space for my client. That's what I'm here for. But you guys have to do what you have to do and what you feel comfortable with. I understand that. And it comes down to you 100%. So my flexibility of what I want and what you guys will allow me to do is your choice. So I want to go ahead and condition the space and make it a nice space for my client so she can put her nice stuff in there, and it'll be a great space for her and enhance the property and the property values. If you guys don't feel comfortable with that, then I'm at your mercy, and I agree, and we can do whatever you guys decide in the end. But that's what I would like, is to make a nice, bright, light space that she can go in and have a nice storage with. So.
Okay, let me ask you real quick.
Let's do a couple more quick questions,
Okay,
and then we can bring it back.
these things that she wants to store in the space, or some kind of antiques or artworks or something, does she intend that people come down there to look at them?
No.
Okay, thanks.
It's a mother's things inherited, that sentimental value, things like that. So,
Commissioner Caroline?
Would you mind if staff said something? I actually would feel better about the space with a deed restriction and maybe more electrical and no windows. It's the windows that make it inviting for a living space. If it's walled in with no windows, the sheetrock, the substandard ceiling heights, maybe a couple of lights, and a deed restriction, I'd feel better about it. It's the windows that really make it inviting with natural light.
Okay. Commissioner Caroline?
That was I was getting to that, Linda, because I wanted the applicant to clarify. You mentioned there was an existing window. It's not clear to me on the plan where was the existing window, and and maybe this was mentioned and I didn't. I didn't.
So
I have their originally submitted plans prior to the first time, so I can look on there.
I'm just talking before the house was improved. Where was
the existing window? If you're looking at the floor plan, was on the right side where the new door is now, and it was an operable window to let in light and air and ventilation.
On the east, what you label the east elevation?
Yes,
okay.
East elevation.
Okay.
To have ventilation, proper ventilation and light, to me, is something that I think is very important and also architecturally pleasing for the house. We've had several neighbors come up to us and say how great the windows looked on the lower level and how it broke up the big expanse of the wall. That is the one thing that I think is very important to this property. And the windows are going to allow you to look in whenever you want anyways and see how this space is being used. So the electrical and the sheetrock and the deed restriction, I'm very willing to work with you on that. I think that the windows are a necessity for the space. But again, that's your call.
Well, I don't know. Windows could damage antiques, so that could be a potential problem. But one other question I had, and I wasn't clear about, was this space sheetrocked prior to the improvements? Okay. And also, it looks like you've got two different materials. You have shingles on the bottom and stucco up above.
Yes,
So
so
you already kind of have two different materials that help break up the building, which is a good thing, so the windows don't really need to do that, what you've already done with materials.
I have one last question. When you did the Title 24 calculations, did it include this space?
no,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
All right, so we good with questions for the applicant? We'll bring it back to the commission. I should ask, I will officially ask if there's anyone else from the public that wants to comment. Okay, so we'll close it for now. We'll bring it back to the commission. If we have any other specific questions, we'll ask you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so it sounds like there's some new discussion about windows and deed restrictions. Let's just make sure if there's any other questions we have for staff that we want to go through. I know I cut you off before, but okay.
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Till they finish their calculation conversation again. So we've got one measurement is the 7-foot height, deems it livable space per the building code. And anything that's 7 foot high is automatically counted as FAR, in the FAR. 7 foot and conditioned, 7 foot in condition, no. Floor aeration is. Yep, oh, sorry.
Zoning ordinance and the building code. The building code doesn't consider something living space unless it's 7 feet. Our code just defines floor area.
Whether
And
it's conditioned or not, or
Yeah,
anything.
it's silent on the conditioned. Staff includes conditioned because it's, you aren't going to have someone living in an unfinished, well, some people do, but an unfinished basement with no insulation and no windows and exposed framing. Most people aren't willing to live there. Once you start putting in insulation and extra outlets and windows and you finish it and put flooring in and you have, then it is eventually at some point going to be used as living space, even if this owner doesn't use it that way. So, I think you guys could make findings and say that you're not counting it towards floor area ratio if the improvements are minimized and it's not so attractive for living space. I think the windows, the conditioned aspect of it, it's living space. It could be used as living space. So.
And I think, that's important to differentiate the two things. When I, as we've talked about this, I think one of the big things that keeps coming back to me is I'm thinking about some of the other buildings that we've done where we're talking about either lifting houses where you don't expand the footprint, you just create space within the footprint. We had another house up on, I think it was Live Oak, where it was perched way up high and there was basically a whole new floor built underneath. It doesn't change the footprint of the structure. It does provide more living space.
And there was a person on Scenic that did something very similar to this, and he was required to lower the ceiling so that it was well below 7 feet. It was like 6 feet.
And so that was an after the fact, come back, said, oh, can I make this living space? The one on Live Oak, it's a single story house, 20 feet above the ground. They built a whole nother story underneath without using space. So I see this as something that's going to continually be an issue, and I think it's really important to make sure that we're clear about the definitions. I think there clearly is we need to make it clear that living space and FAR are not the same thing. I think there's obviously been some interpretation that they've been the same thing, but I think it's not, because clearly the FAR is not quite that cleanly defined. So I think to me, this isn't just this house. This is something that could be an issue in a lot of different places. And so that's why we are having a long discussion about it, because it really is something that in many, many situations there's potential for this kind of thing. And even in this same house, there's potential for it on a whole nother quarter of the square footage. So that's my 2 cents. As hard as we might work on this, I think that's the caution that I feel, is that there are many, many, many more structures like this, and that's a decision we can be making. But anyways.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it was mentioned by the owner's contractor here that there's another house in the neighborhood that had a .72 FAR. So this one may have a 4.2. This one may have a .48. So where does that end? I mean, if people keep comparing, to me, the argument of there are so many other illegal structures, that's right. We can't let chaos continue. We have to stop it at some point, and stick with the code and enforce the code, on a broad level. But I hear staff, if this project, and you put a lot of effort into it, obviously, if this project can sort of remain, and we can somehow approve it with restrictions and conditions such as having no windows, having one light in each segment, in other words, one light with a switch by the stairs so it isn't unsafe, no insulation, deed restrictions, and things like that, then I think we're going to need to actually revisit this and possibly delay this project again. But I'm actually leaning to denial because of the .43, the .48, and the comment that there's others in the neighborhood like it. To me, that just increases chaos. That's my comment on that point.
So you bring up the point about denying it, but because sounds like there's multiple variances that we have to do. So if we make some modifications to the conditions, it could be approved with those conditions. What are the options in terms of modifying and approving versus denying and coming?
You would have to make findings.
Continuing
It's the same. You would have to make findings for setback variances because you're going to be approving conditioned space and a required setback. There's going to be new electrical, and you'd have to make findings for the use permit.
What if it wasn't conditioned? What if we changed it so it wasn't considered?
If it's not considered conditioned, then it's just remaining unimproved basement.
Yeah.
Can I point out a couple things? Just if a space is substandard and not considered legally living space, in other words, not 7 feet but 6'8", it doesn't mean people won't live in it. There's a very front and center issue in San Anselmo on this very matter. People can very easily habitate space that's not to code, okay? Second, during the construction of this, and I believe, David, you did the plans for this, correct? No, I'm sorry, just if you could nod, that'd be great. Thank you. So when the rubber met the road with building this out, there were some technical issues with the stairway and the bathroom, okay? At that point, as often happens in the field, when the reality comes with building these things, sometimes staff gives a little latitude on what's going on. So we don't have Mr. Lockerbie here tonight, but I know from conversations that came my way, as a department head, about the issue of the bathroom, we were okay with giving on the washing area encroaching into the unfinished basement area, okay? So that allowed them to finish the bathroom. It was not as approved. It was not the plans you approved. That's one of the reasons we're back here tonight, because after that was called out, and the windows which were not approved but were being framed in, that got us to this point. And then once they realized they had to come back in for the modifications because things were not being built as you approved it, then here we are in terms of the conditioned space. But again, I just want to reiterate, just because something is substandard ceiling height does not mean people will not live in it, okay? We're good with the giving them what has already been built, different than the plans, the laundry space in the basement area, okay? We're cool with that, and it's been built that way. The windows were framed in, as you heard from the applicant. They were not approved. Back in March, when you had this before you, if there was an existing window at that time that would have made sense to stay in, it was perfectly within their purview to keep that window there, okay? So again, I'm just reiterating, just because it's substandard ceiling height doesn't mean people won't live there. We're cool with the encroachment in that basement area for the washer and dryer, which gave them more bathroom area than you permitted before. We don't feel good about the windows because it makes it more attractive for people to live in substandard living area.
So should I, so you're comfortable with the past permit didn't include the windows, so any action at this point, if it's a denial, then the windows would have to come out because that's what's
That's
tied
correct.
to.
And
if we were looking towards any ideas about approval, we would also be talking about, it sounds like at least there's some level of comfort with no windows and additional
Well,
measures that
we
make that
didn't-
space
We didn't discuss that
non-conditional.
ahead of time.
Okay.
I think
But in
Linda's
terms of
talking off the top of her head. I
trying
might
to
have a
work
different
with-
opinion.
Okay, but I think
to
that you would be making stronger findings for allowing it to be conditioned
Right.
and feeling more comfortable that it wouldn't be used as living space if there were not natural light down there.
Was the previously existing window removed, it was removed when it was lifted up, or where did that window go in the process? Or was it a door, or what was?
No, it was a window. I have their plans, and it was shown as being removed when they raised it and not replaced.
What you approved did not include the
Did not
historic
include a
window.
window.
Okay. So it sounds like there's, we need to get a sense of the commission just to make sure if we're going to spend a lot of time and effort, we need to have a sense of where folks are.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I'm okay with the laundry room being extended out. I'm not comfortable with the ceiling height. I think it sets a bad precedent. I'm not comfortable with the floor to area ratio. And one thing that the report talks about that we haven't discussed here is the parking. I believe there is only one parking space on the site. And right now there's potential for 3 cars because of the structure over the garage and the house. And so adding another space that could be used as livable would probably add more parking burden to the neighborhood. So I'm not comfortable with this. The other thing David mentioned was that this area was not calculated in the original Title 24. If you condition it, it has to go back and be recalculated. And that might start triggering other changes. It might even include removing some of the windows that are in there now. But that's unknown until that is done. But I think the original intent of the original application has been met and some. So I just don't feel comfortable approving this at this time.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I don't have anything substantive to add except that I'm just torn right in half. I'm just torn right in half. I appreciate that this is, as we said in our argument for the approval of the first permit, it is that we are improving the housing stock in Fairfax by not changing the footprint. And this does that. This achieves that. I want to applaud you for coming and talking to us about it and talking to Mark and getting advice and acting on that advice. And I feel like we're complicit in this because Mark's working on the building code and And yeah, a few inches.
Well, can I just say one thing?
And-
I'm sorry, but Mark came to me and said he had agreed, he had told them the ceiling height limits, and then when the windows came in, that's when he brought it to planning's attention. So as far as I know, he didn't think that other improvements were going to be made beyond the 6'8" ceiling heights.
No, and I think Mark is absolutely operating from an excellent place. I think Mark has a very, very good, clear picture of where the lines are. And he's as caught between the blurriness of FAR and the building code. Luckily, he's got building code, so he just says, do that. So that's why I'm torn. I mean, I think that this is a decent improvement to this property without changing the lot coverage, and the lot coverage bothers me more than the FAR does. But also, FAR is one of those things that it's kind of a big deal. It's, we make fence height variances, we make parking variances, those kind of can get massaged on a site, but FAR in Fairfax it's an important thing, and on these small lots, you really feel it when you bump up against the FAR. It's really tight, and the fact that it's already over makes my brain go the other way, saying, it's already over and we want it to go over more, and that doesn't feel right for the neighborhood, as you were saying, Phil. So, I'm not helping anyone here. I'm just feeling better by venting it, but this is one of these situations where, they're trying to do the right thing, and if we can, I don't understand how we can make findings by just removing windows. So if you weren't able to make findings on the conditioned space with windows, how is it different without, if it's based on the argument that it goes over the FAR? So I still don't see how we can make findings, although I'd really like to.
Well, I don't know that you would have to make findings if you deny it and ask them to restore the exterior to the way you approved it. You could just add the statement that you feel that that's adequate enough to ensure that the area not be used as living space. It wouldn't be enticing for living space without natural light, and we'd ask the applicant before he can modify his building permit to do a deed restriction that specifically calls out the square footage that you're allowing to be conditioned storage area, but that it's not to be used for living space.
Well, let me ask, is there...
I mean, I lived in New Jersey, and there are underground rooms that people use, but they're used for the pool room, they're not a child's bedroom. And so I think the less attractive you can make it, the less likely it is that it will be used that way.
Well, people are living in caves in China, so we're all very lucky.
The way I would prefer it is that it just be denied and it remain unimproved.
Well, would we need to do any permitting to allow them to keep the laundry room, which is probably a conditioned space itself?
I don't know. The last time I saw it, it was just framing in this basement area. I haven't been by recently, but when we first agreed to that laundry room, we thought it was just going to be, some plywood floor with the laundry room and unfinished walls around it. A lot of people do that. They have their laundry facility in the basement. We don't have a problem with that. You often find laundry rooms in unimproved, unconditioned basements, garages. So we were okay with that. I don't believe you need to grant anything for them to make that change.
It sounds like that's already been at least verbally approved by staff.
Right.
So, I mean that. So I think what we're getting down to is making sure that we recognize and appreciate that the applicant has come forward. We recognize that this thing came up and it wasn't an intentional issue. I think my understanding is that the work stopped and there was a request and moved forward to come that way. I do think that in my mind the issue is it's more than just this one request. I think it's an issue that's beyond this request. I think what Commissioner Lamont said about floor area ratio. Yes, it is something that it's pretty tight. There have been a few instances I can remember where it's been a 0.01 or a 0.02 kind of a thing, not a 0.08 kind of a thing. So those are the kinds of issues that I think are hard. Where we haven't, the more I've heard, what brought this to attention wasn't the space or the height of the ceiling, it was the windows. And it seems like it was when the windows were framed, that's when this sort of changed from, yeah, we can work with this and try to make it work, to this is really changing the condition of this space and making it into something that is that changes what was approved. And I think the staff has always had to work with applicants and has made things work in most cases. Every once in a while these things do come back, and there are always going to be reasons for that. There are unanticipated consequences, and I think none of this was with intent, and I think every bit of it is reasonable. I think to make the request is reasonable, but that's what our job is to consider the request and then evaluate that in the context of not just this one request, but every other request that we see. So I think that's something that's really important. Go ahead.
And I was going to add also that we've talked about amending our code for clarity in the future, and I know we've talked about the FAR as well, and I think the FAR's silence is confusing. And unfortunately, I think it was interpreted that, well, if it's under 7 feet, then I'm good. It's not habitable. That's the definition of non-habitable space. But through this discussion, that's not the only element that implies calculation of FAR. So the windows are an issue, the drywall is an issue, the lighting, the electrical. There's a lot of factors that are not articulated well in our FAR description of what space is counted and what space is not counted. And so it feels like that was perhaps different interpretations in this. Well, as long as it's under the 7 feet, it won't be counted, and then we can do whatever we want because of our intention, which I agree with, is all good and well, but that actually FAR is calculated based on more than just the height. And I do agree that we do consider the applications both in the context of how this building will be used going forward and what the precedent is set or not. And so that does make it difficult, and you have to be able to have findings, and that's difficult in this one.
So
it's unfortunate that it was interpreted that way.
So I can see you have something to say. I want to make sure that you understand that we've closed it. I'm willing to hear if it's really quick and if it's very specific, and then if it's not, I'm going to cut you off. So, okay. Yep.
I just wanted to say a couple things. Mark is a great inspector, and by no way am I trying to put him down or throw him under the bus. He's always been very helpful and very informative, and I have a lot of respect for him, and I think he does a great service to the Fairfax community. One of the issues that I had is I didn't see anywhere in the code that it says I can't have a window in a storage space. I know in my home in Fairfax, I have a crawl side on the back side of the hill. There's several windows in it. There's been several windows in it, and I'm just wondering where it says in the code that it says I can't have a window in a storage space, because that's what I'm trying to do.
So I think, and that's fine to ask, and that'll be it. But the discussion we had earlier was that if there was a window there, this wouldn't be a discussion. The plans that were approved did not include that window. So essentially, the window is a new action that wasn't part of the original approval. And that's the issue. If there were windows at that location, then it probably would be a different conversation at this point, although we probably would have been having this discussion in March when the application was being evaluated. So,
Mr. Chair,
anyways.
Also just for the benefit of how these things work, if you look back at the conditions of approval in the March approval of the improvements to legitimize the illegitimate living space, if you look at the conditions of approval, it very specifically states that this approval is based on the set of plans that was submitted and that any modifications to that set of plans need to come back to this body. So there were modifications made to those plans without the approval of this body, and that's one of the reasons we're here.
So I'm going to ask if you can switch your microphones, because for some reason you get feedback every time you talk. All right, so it's back to us, and I think I think we've already closed the public comment, but I gave you some opportunity. I think if I made a mistake by letting you speak the last time, then I apologize for that. All right. So it's back with us, and go ahead, Commissioner Caroline.
Okay. One suggestion I'd like to offer here is I don't think the windows are necessary on the, what side is it, the north side? And I think they, I don't know, detract from the design of the house, but I could support one small window on the east elevation that was the size of the one that used to be there, but move closer to the left corner of the house.
Would that light the stairs with natural light?
It wouldn't. But otherwise, I agree with the comments that Esther made. As far as with the laundry, and I don't think we want to, try to set precedent for the future as far as, improving. I'm kind of torn, like if the sheetrock, maybe sheetrock's okay, maybe it's not, I'm kind of torn on that issue, but I think the windows do seem to be a big deal. So I think if we eliminated them on the north side and maybe kept one small one on the east side, which is what they had before, then that might be, that might work.
So I just want to make sure that this would be changes to even the original application. Is that correct? The window would be in a different place.
You mean what was presented in March?
What was approved in March.
Right, but there was an existing window in that area on that side of the house.
Okay.
So they'd be getting what they had prior to the permit.
Yeah.
But I guess the question then is, does that one window bump it into habitable space, and then we have to have findings? If you look on just the staff, once you make a change, it requires a use permit and you have to have findings. And so once it's considered a substantive change from what was approved, then we do have to have all those findings. So,
if I may, it's within your purview. He's come forward forthrightly and asked for these two windows, which is great. That's totally within their right. And you can modify what's being asked for in terms of windows. That's within your purview.
Right. I think the applicant can take our comments. Let me just see if I can sort of summarize. I think the best process here would be if the applicant came back with a new application that included, like Ms. Caroline said, a small window in the northeast corner. I mean, my thing is there's a couple of points. There's a laundry room down there. It's less likely to be habitable, the smell, et cetera, of the laundry room. If it was one small window that was used for possibly to light the staircase, I could see a utility for that, in that if the power went out and someone needed to go downstairs for some reason, they'd be safer if there's light. And those things, no insulation, no huge electrical installation, except where necessary for the bathroom, et cetera, and the laundry room And that would be kind of a reapplication that I would recommend, so that it's, and then a permit would be possibly granted with a condition, with a deed restriction and some other conditions at that point. That's kind of where I'm at. If those things were minimized so that it was less likely to be a living space and the deed restriction in a new application, not this one, then I could see that. But I'm kind of vying towards denial of this application for the FAR problem. And to me, that's a big deal.
So and I do think what I'm hearing is that it sounds like one of the projects that this commission might get to work on is the development of a definition for what conditioned space is. Not just the FAR, but conditioned space. I also wanted to mention that the FAR was actually worked on, but we're talking about redesigning conditioned space to something that would be conditioned in a way that doesn't count against, so it's a new definition, even if conditioned space isn't the right word. There was a process, I don't know, about 7 years ago, talking about the FAR, and there was a number of folks that were asked, including town council, and ultimately it was sort of that untouchable thing, that there were lots of discussions about the FAR and how it could be modified and what the options were, and in the end there was just no progress that was made. So anyways, process question.
So process question. On the page, the recommendation from staff is moved to deny the application. However, there's also statements in here about recommend that the laundry room be approved for relocation, which it already is. So it's almost like we're not really approving that. We're just, it is what it is. It's been implemented, because if we approve anything, then we have to findings, and it's a...
Yeah, maybe approve is the wrong word to use, because you can have a laundry room in an unfinished basement. There's
Right.
nothing that says you can't have a laundry room.
Right. Okay,
So-
so just acknowledge that. it is.
Mark was kind of,
Working within
since the floor plans went to you and you approved specific floor plans, the argument could be made that Mark should not have agreed to that he should have made it come back to you. But since the space, I believe that we believed that the space was not going to be conditioned, and you find laundry washers and dryers in garages, you find them in unfinished basements, we didn't think it was that big of a deal. But then windows went in, and now it's conditioned space.
Right,
It's
no,
no
I was just
longer
asking process-wise,
Yeah.
because if we were denying, but then one part of it said that we were approving, I was just confused about that, so it's not that we're approving any, if we deny, we're not approving
The strict
anything.
interpretation of that one condition, where it says any change from the plan
Right.
should have come back to you.
Right,
You could make the argument we should have brought that back to you.
right, but we don't.
We can take the action that's recommended and not jeopardize the work in the laundry room and all that's already there. Okay. All right, so go ahead.
But if we did anything else, like a window or something like that, then it would require the use permit and all of that modification.
Right, of your use permit and your variances.
Okay, so I think there's been a good amount of discussion on this one, and I think we need to call this one to a vote. But I also think that there's actually been some ideas batted around that could be options if the applicant's interested, that might be considered down the road. So anyways, but I think, is there anyone who's ready to make a motion on this, or are we going to continue discussion?
I mean, I'm tending towards denial, but I am frustrated that some modification, just the blurriness of it makes me uncomfortable, that some modification, maybe we should have, but we're okay with it, but any further, we're not okay with. So I know that there's a line somewhere, and it feels like some of it technically, by the letter of the law, has been, anyhow,
Well,
Well, you're technically not modifying the approved use permit, because you're not increasing, if they just move the laundry room, you're not increasing the floor area ratio. It's just relocating a washer and dryer out of an improved condition space to basement area.
They're not moving a laundry room, they're simply moving the washer and dryer into a
Right.
space that's not
Right.
conditioned. It's
Right.
not a new laundry room, it's not a laundry room,
Right.
it's the facility, that's it.
Well, actually, one thing I was wondering was whether there's sound insulation, especially between the laundry room and the area around the laundry room that could be living space. That was a question I had, but I'm not sure if there is. But in any case, the FAR problem to me is the big issue. I could see, though, that the applicant could come back to this body with another application that contemplates some small window as mentioned, and other non-living space types of questions.
So could I respond? It wouldn't necessarily, if you wanted to go that direction, it wouldn't necessarily require another application. You would just continue this for modified drawings per your direction.
Okay, that's a great suggestion, too, if that might speed things up for the applicant.
If you want to go that direction, it doesn't require a whole new application. If they wanted to, they could make amendments to what they've submitted and come back for continued hearing. That's an option.
But if they, if they really aren't willing, or if that's not the way they want to go, then there's no point in continuing it. So you might ask the applicant if that's something they might be interested in.
So I guess there's a question for you. You've heard what Mr. Green described. Is that something you think that your client would be interested in, or? Yeah.
And David, I'm sorry to ask you that before, but we're on the record, we're broadcast live, we're doing recording. So if you're in the back, we can't hear you in the future when we review this.
I would have to talk with her and see what she says. I have several other questions and other things I'd like to discuss. I should probably do that with Linda at another date. Otherwise, we'll be here until 11 or 12 o'clock. So maybe I'll resubmit for a different permit, adding in windows. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And again, you could continue this,
continue
which
it,
would
and
allow the
for
applicant to
discussion.
talk to the owner
But
before you.
that would delay his final. So if you request a
Yeah.
continuance, you can't go forward.
They're
with
living
your
there
final.
now.
Okay.
They're done. Doesn't really matter how long it takes to get the final at this point.
So it sounds like the other thing, the continuance is it's not a new permit application, no new fee. It's a continuance, and you could be making modifications to this. I think the question I have for staff is this the permit streamlining.
We're good.
Timeline.
We're good.
So it would have to
declared-
happen in the next month.
It would
the
have to happen in
discussions.
January.
So.
But you're good if you want to continue this to January meeting. We're within the 60 days.
And then if it takes them more time, they can agree to a voluntary extension of time under the Permit Streamlining Act for 90 days beyond that. So we're still, okay.
Can I just resubmit for another permit if I want to put in windows? I mean, isn't that something I can just do next week and say, I want to add to these windows once this permit's finalized? Is that something that I can do?
Oh, so he's asking if he gets his project final, then later on when he comes in to put in windows, what's to stop him from putting windows into that basement
Well,
area?
no, I would.
So
He's
submit for
asking
a
if he could
permit.
make a permit.
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
apply to come back and modify
Sure.
your approved plans.
And
So
with-
that sounds like you'd want a decision, but if they make a decision and you reapply, then you have to pay fees again. That's what they're trying to help you avoid.
Right, but is that something that would go to design review and have to sit in front of the town council? I don't
Yes, you'll
know.
be back here again to put
Okay.
windows in.
Well, I would have to talk to my client. I can't
Okay.
make the decision for her because she's not here. But I appreciate you trying to work with me and, do what you can do. I
See, I
appreciate it.
think the bottom, let me ask you, since you're there, though, is there any insulation in the walls of the laundry room?
No, there's
Okay.
not.
Okay. I mean, one of the problem, I think, is that it has to remain not living space.
I agree.
And be not conditioned, because that was the reason the original permit was granted. So if your client has some modifications she wants to make, but they're really minimal, not like this, and they wouldn't make it living space, she could then try to modify her application and come back without a fee and another fee and see if, we can do that. But if you reapply and you've got multiple windows and it could look like living space, it's likely to get denied. It might be
Sure.
a waste of time,
Yeah, I got that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so it sounds like we could make the recommendation continue. If the applicant wanted to not pursue it, then it sounds like they can do that with you. If they decide they want to make modifications, they can work with you on that. I wasn't hearing that one was an advantage over the other, but it sounds like continuance would actually allow, if the client
he
says,
said-
hey, I don't want to do anything, then you can just,
We'll just
Essentially,
continue it to January, and they can either submit some revisions that they think might be acceptable to
Right.
you, or they
Or
can
not.
continue to go forward with these, and you'll take your action based on these. Well, or Jim's saying if they decide they don't want to make any changes, and they're willing to live with your decision, we could schedule, well, that's predetermining what the commission's going to do.
Yeah.
Never mind.
well, go ahead.
I'd feel comfortable with a continuation just now that Dave has the benefit of having heard our conversation, and we've got really good input from staff, and everybody knows where everyone's standing now. And it seems like there could be findings with, one light and a deed restriction and the language of conditioned storage space and unfinished walls and no windows or a minimal window to replace a formerly existing window. It seems like we're a lot closer to getting where we want to be than not if we just continue it to January and allow them the choice of changing it or not, and then moving forward from that position rather than this position of a double bind almost.
Right, the only caveat is, and you might want to ask the applicant, if he'd rather to not have a denial so that the work can be finalized.
I didn't hear that was a concern. He did answer that. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to continue application. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. Application 1446, 127 Dominga, to the January 15th meeting.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second.
Second.
We have a
Oh, you
second.
have a second.
So all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. All right. So
Thank you.
the next item is item 5, the formula business ordinance. This is a continued item. We've had a few discussions about it. And remind me that there was a revised version put in our packets? Or that was yeah. A very recent revised version with some comments from Mr. Green. Didn't I see that in the email?
There's a red line.
Oh, that's-
A red line,
That
okay.
was a while back. I think there's also a revision.
I remember seeing something in an email.
I'm sorry, I'm lost. We have a staff report that's been revised from the last meeting.
Go ahead.
Is there a red line for the formula ordinance, or the red line is just for the sign ordinance?
Just for the sign ordinance, because your direction at the last meeting was to create a whole separate section dealing with formula businesses that's going to cover all the commercial zones, and we didn't think we needed to. Right.
And the language for that wasn't changed from the prior language when it was in one section, correct?
Right.
Got
They just changed the language so that it covers CC, CH, CS, CL, PDD, and not CR.
All right, let's hear it. Sorry
Sorry
for
preempting.
throwing a curveball at you.
Okay. You first heard this, I'm not going to go into the background. You know the background from previous meetings. You heard this on September 25th. You heard it again on October 30th. At the September 25th meeting, you asked for another whereas to be added, that whereas the Planning Commission has fully endorsed the conversion of highway commercial zone to central commercial and does not intend to the adoption of this ordinance to slow down the impetus for the town of Fairfax to fully implement the 2010-2030 Fairfax General Plan, quote unquote. And then after the October 30th meeting, you said you wanted another whereas that said, whereas the formula business ordinance has been an essential and central tenet of the town of Fairfax for some time now. And also, you requested that we come back with a revised draft ordinance that applied to all applicable commercial zones in town. So subsequent to the October 30th special meeting, where you had the second hearing on this, we did that, but we also, the town attorney caught the fact that not only in the commercial zones of town would this be applicable, but technically speaking, in the planned development district of town, it doesn't preclude commercials. So with the spirit of your wanting to have a carte blanche restriction on formula retail, we included in this the planned district development. And the only other caveat is that it is not within our purview to change the recreational commercial zone. This one site is the Town and Country Club, and that has to go back to the voters for any change in the specifications from the finding of the court. So we made those changes, and not only is the ordinance a clean cut without track changes because it's not relevant, the resolution was Spaghetti Factory also, so we did not include it didn't make sense to include the previous resolution. So with that, I think we're ready for questions, if any.
I thought it was great. You came back with what we had talked about, so thank you. Appreciate that. I think it's a good approach. I appreciated our chair's idea on this at the last time. I think it follows through with a number of incidences when we've tried to make our code more efficient and effective by not having duplication of language. So, and I thought the way that you added in consistent language to each of those sections worked very well. You did include the commercial recreation zone, however, is still included in there, so that probably has to be redacted. Section 8. Probably should be taken out because that does have
Can you
CR.
give me a number line?
132 through 137.
Thank you for catching that. How did that sink in?
So any text code changes in the commercial recreation has to go to the voters?
Hmm?
Good catch.
That's a very good catch. Thank you. I can't believe that got by us.
Go ahead.
I also noticed a typo in the resolution on the first page, the second whereas at the bottom of the page. The commission determined that more effective, it says why, I think that's supposed to be way.
I hope this is all there is because I really want to sign something from tonight's meeting. I'm just saying.
There is another typo. Line 96 is complement existing businesses, but I think it's misspelled.
We can do a spell check on it later, but yeah, I think it's okay.
I think it's correct.
Compliment with an I. All right, well, I think there's one really, really, really good catch. Any other specific comments or concerns?
Well, I'm going to reiterate a concern I had before, that the definition of formula restaurant doesn't contain the same language as formula business, and that is the word franchise. Formula restaurants are, having worked with McDonald's and Jack in the Box, they are generally required by a corporate headquarters or franchise to do this, that, and the other thing that all the others do. That same language should be incorporated in formula restaurant, because there could be, in the future, litigation-wise, someone asking, why isn't that language in formula restaurant if McDonald's tries to come in here? That is my concern.
And I would just ask, and I think that's fine, wouldn't McDonald's be a formula business? Formula business doesn't mean that it's not serving food.
Well,
is that a way of looking at it?
Then why do we have two different definitions?
That's a different question that we could ask.
Why do we have two different definitions? Can't a restaurant just be considered a business?
We'd have to defer to town council on that one.
I would be perfectly comfortable if we wanted to add franchise in the formula restaurant definition.
And we can take forward your
addresses that.
note on why are there two in our staff report when this goes up to council with your recommendation.
Right. I just think that 34 years of litigation, attorneys can take a statute and not see some language in one part and see it in another and say, that means that a restaurant, which is a McDonald's, could, if it's a franchise, maybe that means they could come in. If we could get it under the, and convince some judge to agree with that. And then you've got an appeal process that takes for years, and what do you do?
Can we just add, why don't we just take the phrase that says, that is required by a corporate headquarters or franchise or other arrangement to maintain any of the following, and add it into the restaurant that says, any restaurant that is required by a corporate headquarters or franchise or any other arrangement to be that is devoted to the preparation, blah, 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 and just stick it in there, and then we're good, right?
That sounds great.
I think we just
I would recommend that.
Take that clause from the formula business and add it to any restaurant. That is required by a corporate headquarters or franchise or other arrangement to maintain, or I should say, or other arrangement
to be devoted.
That is devoted to the preparation and offering of food and beverage for sale. So you're basically taking about a line and a half, adding it to formula restaurant, and then that's the lead-in. That's the operative portion of the definition.
That's great.
It gets franchise.
Yeah.
We got it.
All right. All right. Any other comments or motion?
Comment, you guys did a great job here, really. A few typos, big deal. You did a great job.
A lot of credit goes to town attorney as well as Linda.
I'd like to make a motion a motion to approve resolution 14-3 as 14-13, excuse me, recommend the adoption of resolution 14-13. That's what we're doing. We're recommending the adoption of resolution 14-13 to the town council for modification of the formula business ordinance in the town of Fairfax.
You had it right the first time.
Oh, we're approving the resolution?
The Planning Commission is approving the resolution.
So we're approving the resolution, recommending the adopt. So I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 14-13, recommending adoption of ordinance number to be determined to the town council modifying the formula business ordinance.
With the recommended
With
changes
the
by the
recommended
commission.
changes by the commission, with the elimination of section 8, line 132 through 137, addition of the phrase in line 69 and 70 into line 74 with respect to creating parallel construction between the formula business and the formula restaurant definitions, and other typos as articulated previously.
Is there a second? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? Thank you. We have accomplished the first, I remember, ordinance change since I've been on the planning commission. Isn't that scary? All right, let's go for 2 tonight. Now we get to talk about the next item, which is we've done some other ordinances. We've made lots of ordinance recommendations. Whether they've stuck or not is a different question.
Each one we do is another one checked off on the list.
Yeah,
Let's look at that
we've
one.
made some short-lived changes to the ordinance. All right, we're going to go to the sign ordinance now. Ready for that one?
Yeah, we're going to double duty this one. Linda, you want to have at it?
Oh, I wasn't going to do the staff report.
Okay, so the staff report's pretty much the same. I think Commissioner Green made some friendly amendments, and we had no problem with that at the staff level, and I think it was forwarded to you. Thank you, Commissioner Green, again, for your eagle eye.
You're welcome.
Just
Sorry.
switch microphones.
Better? Okay, thank you for telling me that. So I think you've been well versed in this. There was a little heartburn over the terms at one point, but I think we've settled on, I think, where you're all comfortable with the terms. So I won't belabor the report. If you have any questions.
Any questions or comments? Go for it.
I appreciate the terms. They are very consistent, with one exception. And I don't know if it's intentional or not. Section 17.064.070, the sign permit requirements, item number B that was amended and redacted, does have the last sentence starts with non-commercial signs without the word temporary in
I'm
front.
sorry, Commissioner Hamilton, where are you again? You're on 040.
No, I'm on the red line version. Oop, turn your thing off again.
I know what you're going to say, and it was intentional.
Okay, please explain.
Because what the town manager explained to me is there are non-commercial signs that aren't temporary, and non-commercial signs are allowed in the same locations, in the same size, and for the same duration as commercial signs. Non-commercial signs will be temporary or permanent, so it was left off intentionally. Yeah.
Then the other question that I had was in the design criteria section. So the design criteria section, which is 17.064.140, is organized in 2 parts. The first part is all commercial signs must conform with blah, blah, blah. And then item number 2 says all non-commercial signs must conform to the following blah, blah, blah. One, is that all temporary non-commercial signs or just all non-commercial signs?
All non-commercial signs.
Temporary or not?
Right.
So then I do have an issue with that, because if it's temporary, because it's saying that the non-commercial signs don't have to comply with all of the stuff above. They only have to comply with A and B. They don't have to comply with the C, D, E, and F as above, because it's an or. I'm reading it as an or, because one's commercial, one's non-commercial, which means that you could have a permanent non-commercial garish sign that is brilliant or otherwise inappropriate to the character of the town. I could see saying we're not going to worry so much about that if it was temporary, but I think that even a permanent non-commercial sign should address some of the items in the commercial sign above.
Is there a way to address it by just, instead of saying all
Then-
commercial signs and all non-commercial, could we say all
Well, let me
permanent
think about this,
signs and
because
all
when I talked to
non-permanent?
Garrett, he said that if you did want to insert temporaries, he wouldn't have a problem with it. So I think if you inserted temporary in that 2, right, that would cover temporary signs that aren't going to be up permanently, and then,
Get rid of the word commercial and just say, because really the first section is all signs, commercial or non-commercial, that are
non-commercial.
permanent, shouldn't be garish and should be architecturally appropriate
so maybe
and blah, blah,
just,
blah.
just replace the word commercial with permanent sign?
Yeah, and
I believe
then
that's the intention.
Okay.
all temporary signs
That
would only
makes
have
sense.
2 criteria.
That would be
that they
clearer,
follow.
too.
Okay,
Are we clear on that?
I believe we're clear.
And then is the bottom all temporary non-commercial or just all temporary signs?
I think it's just temporary, because you're covering commercial above, right? Permanent? Yeah, so,
So then item number 2 would just, instead of
Should
saying
say
all
temp-
non-commercial signs, it would say all temporary signs
Got
must
it.
conform to the following
That
criteria.
makes sense.
Which makes
Okay.
sense to me, because you
Got
don't
it.
have to worry about architectural
Right.
blah, 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 if it's temporary. They can be garish if they're temporary. That's all.
thank you, that's very clear. I like the changes.
So I'm just going to throw this out. I think I agree wholeheartedly, but I worry that I think we're safer by saying temporary non-commercial for that second one, because there's a bunch of sections before, like in 64040, that talk about temporary business identification
Oh, I thought
signs,
we,
temporary
wait,
banners.
then maybe we
all
weren't
of
clear,
that.
because I thought we were leaving to all temporary, non-commercial.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that keeps it safe. If we did temporary, then it sort of introduces a few other. So we're saying permanent for A
And temporary,
and
non-commercial.
temporary non-commercial for
Yeah.
B,
Okay.
for 2, yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? We have worked these over pretty well over the last few months. Anyone willing to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 1414, with the noted clarifications that I've lost in my paper.
To section 17.
In section 17.064.140, design criteria, change the word commercial to permanent in number 1. And in number 2, change
Add temporary.
all,
Add the word temporary.
yes, yeah, just add the word temporary, so it reads all temporary non-commercial signs. Is that everything?
Those are the ones we've discussed.
Yeah.
Is
That's
there a second?
I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. So we've been able to get a bunch of end-of-year business done.
And again, thank you for
2014.
taking the fine-tooth comb to these things and making them work. I know that's tedious work. I know, but I'm thanking you. Thank you, you guys. Thanks.
All right. We'll work through the rest of this pretty quick. We'll have a very contentious election here in a minute. The next item is the minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the November 20th minutes? We were efficient. have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? We have 2 abstentions, but we have enough to approve it. So the minutes from November 20th are approved. The next item is our discussion item, the zoning ordinance. We can check 2 things off the list. That's our, we're in discussion items still. We haven't gotten down there. So are there any other items from tonight's discussions that we might want to add to that list? I had jokingly said conditioned space is certainly going to become a topic of discussion. I know it's defined, but...
No, but I added it on my list, so.
We have conditioned space. Any other items that we should add? All right.
Does the FAR use the word conditioned space? Is that, I mean, that's...
No. So what I just made a note to myself, clarify, we might even want to insert a definition of what constitutes non-habitable and clarify in the FAR definition what counts towards it, so.
Yes.
There's a really great definition of FAR in the county ordinances. Marin County ordinances has a really clear and complete definition. We might look at that.
Yeah, there's never a problem with clarity. It's the number, the percentage that really seems to be the sticking point. So, anyways. All right, so it sounds like the next item on the agenda is the election of the chair and vice chair. So, as some of you have heard or know, I've been able to serve 8 years on the Planning Commission, and so this is officially my last meeting. So I'll just put that out there, but I think I'll have more to say here in a minute, but we should get through this. And in terms of, I guess we need to announce viable candidates. So just so everybody fairly knows
maybe I can
who the folks that...
Echo that,
Yeah.
Just so you all are aware, if you're not aware, Commissioner Ketchum is stepping down after tonight's meeting, and Commissioner Lamont's term is up at the end of January, and you've decided to not re-up also. So we're very sad as staff to see you both stepping down, but both of you obviously would not be in contention. And Commissioner Ezeret is not here tonight, but she will be on the commission. So with that.
I also would like to make a comment. My husband was diagnosed with a serious medical condition in October, and that's limited my attendance for the last 2 months, October and November. Next month, he's going to go to Seattle for 2 to 3 months for advanced treatment for his condition. So that's might limit my attendance in the future. So I would not wish to seek nomination for the chair at this time.
And if I do the math correctly, that means there are 4 commissioners that are in the candidate pool.
No, as honored as I would be, I'm afraid that my schedule's constraints would not allow me to fill the shoes.
Y'all are going to make me reconsider my decision.
Yes.
Make that 3 eligible commissioners.
Make it 2. I mean, while I'm planning on staying, if I'm reappointed, I would prefer not to take on a chair or vice chair role. I've been there and would like to allow others to take on that role for various reasons.
So I'm going to ask a little bit of advice from staff, is that it sounds like we better continue this. And,
Actually, you have 2 eligible commissioners left.
do.
One doesn't happen to be here.
Yeah.
I would recommend you ask Commissioner, the one in
Who's not
attendance,
here.
if
Well,
he's game.
there is that. Go ahead.
I would like to nominate Phil Green for the chair of the Planning Commission, if he is willing to accept the honor. Because
Should have
I think
started there.
Not only is he one of the few eligible, but he is also excellent planning commissioner, and I would be thrilled to see him as a chair. So I'd like to nominate Phil.
Well, let me say this. I've been here for a year, and a year, 2 months, and I have enjoyed every minute of this. I enjoy the preparation. My practice, includes real estate and zoning, so it enhances that, and that enhances this. And I've turned down chairmanships before and been happy about it. But and frankly, I think Roxanne should have a shot. But I'd be happy to do that. And thank you for that comment. I wonder sometimes if I'm doing any good here, but thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I'm having a lot of fun here, I just want to say.
If you, your point's well taken about Roxanne not being here. If you wanted to put this over to January, is there any protocol, Linda, in your mind?
I'd like to second that before we...
Or you're the vice chair right now, right? You're not here in January? Or could you be here in January? You don't know, really?
Well, right now, we just got word that my husband has to be in Seattle in January 14th. I don't know what date the meeting is.
Our next meeting is the 15th.
Okay, so I don't believe I would be here at the January 15th.
So the only problem is you won't have a chair or a vice chair.
I think we should go ahead then.
I think if...
I'll tell you what,
Phil-
I'd be glad to act as chair January 15th.
Okay.
And we can leave it at that for now if you like. I'd be glad to be chair. I'm absolutely flattered, flabbergasted, and amazed. And I could never fill the other chair's shoes who were here this year. You two, it would be impossible to conduct this meeting like you guys do and have. And I must say, you did it better than some judges conduct their courts. And I have to just want to say that. That's all. So I'd be glad to serve as acting
Yeah, and we can
chair
actually,
next
we don't have to decide that tonight at the meeting. If we don't have a chair and vice chair, then the body selects who would represent that meeting.
Yeah, and I think we can either continue it. I think there's a nomination, and there's been a nomination and a second, so I think we can also vote. And I think frankly there's a lot of I don't see that there would be any reason for concern. I don't think. I
think Roxanne
she's got
would
a lot
be
going
an
on too.
excellent chair as well, but I know
Yeah.
that we've heard from her recently, even just as recent as the last meeting with respect to the General Plan Implementation Committee, which I think she would have been, I think both of you would be excellent representatives on that body and in chair, vice chair roles. Ideally, she would be willing to take on the vice chair role. I don't think we can nominate her in her absence, but we could inform her perhaps of our interests. But from what I've heard from her in terms of her schedule and stuff like that, it's certainly not an indication of our esteem for her and her ability to take on that role in any way whatsoever, I think.
No, absolutely. Her education and experience and guidance here would indicate that you're absolutely right, that she would be an excellent chair.
So if I hear you correctly, there's a motion, a second on the floor to elect a chair, and you're going to defer the election of the vice chair till January.
Yes. And just so everyone remembers, and we did this early on, we actually rewrote the because it used to be that the chair was a 2-year position, not a 1-year position. So, but there's never actually been a seniority issue. So I think just know that it's never been a seniority decision. It's really been about interest, experience, ability, and I think that's kind of where it's fallen.
2 1-year terms that you're
You can serve 2 consecutive terms, but they're individual 1-year terms. So it's not like a 2-year appointment. So anyways, yeah, this is my 3rd time. So there you go. All right. So there's a motion and a second. I'd like to call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Okay.
I'm not even going to ask opposed. Okay, none opposed. All right, congratulations.
Thank you. I won't make a speech. I
All
really
right.
appreciate it.
I'm going to make a speech later, but I'm going to keep running the meeting because, you know, why? I guess I should hand over the thing? No. Should I hand it over? Okay. Well, that's very generous of you. Planning Director's report.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. If the last two council meetings, there's been a report on the agenda following up on the forums we did, the most recent forum on Tenalima and School Street. The council never got to them on the agendas and pushed it forward. It's going to be on the consent calendar in January. Likewise, in the last meeting, there was a report on the joint meeting you had with the Affordable Housing Committee that happened quite close to the next council meeting, so we were going to be doing a lot of verbal reporting on the results of that committee, joint committee meeting. That's also on the agenda for January. It got punted from December, this meeting. So those two items will be up in January. They're both on consent, by the way. I'll be writing a more detailed report on the housing if you happen to read the one that was in the staff report last time. And let's see. Also, since we just heard that Chairman Ketchum was going to step down today, we didn't have time to prepare, and Commissioner Lamont will be here for January, so we were planning on a little ceremony for you in January, and we would like to do that for you also. So it's sort of like Hotel California, you know, you can't leave totally yet. We need you back here on January 15th if you're in town, so we can throw accolades on you. So we'll be doing that, and that's my report. Although, let me just add, again, you're not quite gone yet, so I'll save my comments for you for January. But I did the math. I've been here about 5 3/4 years of your 8 years of service on the council, on the Planning Commission, and little Freudian slip there. And I can tell you what an honor it's been to work with all of you and your predecessors also that were here for the time when I first got here. And in your email that you sent us today, I was really struck with what you said. I'll forward that on tomorrow to you all. But I just want to tell you what a pleasure it's been and an honor it's been. 3 of those 5 3/4 years I've been here, you've been chair. And I think you really have created a decorum under your chairmanship that's really helped move beyond the era before I got here that was so contentious, and really solidify how great this body can perform and act. And for me personally, one of the crowning glories of the time I've been here was when we were in the home stretch for the general plan, and we sequestered the special committee, the super committee. Congress stole that term, and we all went off to the inlet tides at Bodega Bay, and we put the finishing touches on that document, which again was a bottom-up document created by the town of Fairfax over a 14-year period. It's not perfect, but it is perfect in its intent in my mind, and it's a incredibly beautiful living document, including the housing element. And I was struck. We went through the agenda at the staff meeting yesterday for the January agenda, and in the regular meeting hearings, there are 4 items, and each one of those 4 items were very different. And it struck me during our meeting yesterday as staff that each one is called out in the general plan, and I was able to point people back at our staff meeting and saying, hey, heads up, you know, with regards to noise and these other issues. This is laid on safety, evacuation protocol, all these things. Council wants to know more about what we're doing for emergency preparedness. The commission, in its wisdom, separated out community preparedness in the safety element to its own section, and there's protocol in there for creating emergency exits, right down to as-built plans, so there can be expedited permitting if there's a disaster in town. That document lives on because of all the work of the commission and the town council and the Affordable Housing Committee and the GPAC, General Plan Advisory Committee, which is now morphed into the GPIC. So I just want to tell you what a pleasure it's been. And hopefully you're not leaving for good in terms of being involved with the town. So without further ado, thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, no, and I will just roll into my comments because I feel like I need to say something. I first joined the council. There were times, and I have to say thank you first to Shelley because we actually joined the same day. And so we've had full 8 years as two of us seeing these changes, and everything that I feel and everything, the accomplishment that I feel, it's because, it's partially shared with Shelley, all these things that we've been able to do, the tone, the communication, all of those things. I always felt like we kind of had the same perspective and not always agreed on the idea, what we wanted, but how to get there and the right way to communicate was always the way to go. But there were times, and you guys would have been entertained by this, and everybody that isn't watching right now would have been entertained, where we had commissioners get up in front and start, almost coming to blows during meetings, and it was pretty unbelievable. And so that's where we started, and I think so. It's not just a statement to say that the tone has changed, and it's not just it's actually a reality, because it would have been reality TV 8 years ago, and at this point it's a really boring, nobody wants to watch it kind of a thing, which I think is important and I think it's good. The chairmanship, I actually have to say that the first, there's these things that you think are, wow, how you aspire to these things, but I loved it. And so, Commissioner Phil, you're going to love it. It's a really interesting, it's a very different place. Because you're running the meeting, you need to pay attention to all of those things. So it's a very different perspective on how things go. My perspective has always been, how did we get here, and where is it going to take us? And so whether it's always a single request, but what does that mean? What have we done in the past for similar requests? Where have we made accommodations, variances? Where have we not made variances? The worst thing to be is unpredictable as a commission. And the commission had a reputation of just being like, nobody knew what the commission was going to decide. And we might not make decisions that people like, but we should be able to explain those decisions and have a rationale behind it and support. And there's always going to be things that we're going to want to continue to debate. But I think it's debated in a way that gets us and the town moving forward in a direction that actually benefits the town. So I always felt like I was I remember back in, 5 years ago, we had a house like this, or we had a request like this. So, and Linda always appreciated it because she can say that way back earlier than any of the rest of us. But I think moving towards just fairness, listening, making sure people's voices are heard. We can't satisfy everybody, and this group, all of us here, have been very deliberative and thoughtful and respectful in every meeting. And I think that's important, and we just got to keep remembering that that's something that we need to be that. We need to show that that's what this town is about. That's how we communicate in this town. That this is the way this town can be. There's going to still be some contentious times and contentious issues, but it's how we absorb that, how we communicate, and how we translate that information into something that makes sense for the community. So I will keep in touch. I'll stay involved. I'm coaching baseball again, but no, I've my family, my mom. It's almost the same timeline and track that you're describing. It just brought a new reality to what I need to be focusing on, and so that's partially why I've decided not to keep up with this. I'll relate this to everybody since it was so funny this evening when I told my 7-year-old, "This is my last commission meeting, then I can go to your Christmas concerts and things like that." And he's like, "Well, why? I wanted to watch you on TV." So little did I know that the kids are actually going to be disappointed that I'm not on TV. So, anyways, somebody out there thinks we're on TV.
Maybe record it.
I never, I never did. I should have, but oh well. Oh yeah, they're online. That's right. That's right. So, I
to watch these over and over. They can watch the
yeah, it's getting old. But anyway, I do totally appreciate everyone here, and Shelley, many thanks. It's been great. Shelby, same thing. Shared a lot of time up here, so thanks. Anyone else?
Yes. I was on the design review committee before I was on the planning commission, so I've been doing these meetings for a really long time, and I'm just stepping down because I feel like it's a really good time to get some fresh blood going, and I am so honored to work with you guys and with Roxanne as the newest members, and I have so much hope for this body with your presence here, and I have such faith in you, and I'm so glad to know that you're going to be here. And I agree, Brandon, Shelley is really been a real guide for us, for me especially, and you have set the tone that will last a long time. A new era for civility and for respect and for the honor of the letter of the law, and you've just done a phenomenal job, and thank you. So I'm going to leave it there right now. Thank you.
Can I just say that I feel really cheated? Shelley gets 8 years, and how long have you been here?
I don't know.
And I got 1 year, but I just wanted to thank you for being a wonderful example. You set the bar really high and the standard really high, and it's pushed me to try to be a better public servant. So I hope we see you again, but I want to thank you for being such a wonderful example and role model.
And remember, you're qualified the first day you got here, so don't forget that. None of us are new. We're all commissioners. So.
I'm just hoping we're advertising for new commissioners, and I'm working on that also. Okay.
The notice just went out.
You're going to make
We'll
a
go out
heck of a
tomorrow.
great coach. I'm absolutely sure of that.
The notice will be put out tomorrow.
And you are going to be here in January for us to continue on with this, correct? Because I have a lot of things I wanted to say, but I'm going to hold them until January.
I blindsided
We have a roast in January. Make sure it's a light. Make sure it's a light.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll do more of this ceremonial stuff at January 15th meeting, although it sounds like, Laurel, you won't be able to join us on that night, so.
Probably not, but I'm not sure at this moment.
We'll be thinking about you. So.
And if I could just also add, both with you, Laurel, and your husband, and Brandon, you with your mother, you're in my thoughts and sincerest wishes as you go through this. I've been through a rocky road myself recently, as has Commissioner Green. So my hearts and thoughts are with you both.
All right. I know what everybody's waiting for us to adjourn. No, I had to make a choice tonight, and this has been important to me for a long time. So, but there's other important things that I'm going to be focusing on now. So, anyways, we ready to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second it. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.